Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 30th November 2024. And here we are to present you this recap video for today's Bhagavad Gita study session. It'll be only me today. Mummy is taking care of important family commitments, and so we'll see how this video unfolds. The first one that it'll be with just me, but hopefully can do some justice to the content that we covered in class and shall continue to revisit as the verses unfold. So I'll bring up the screen and we'll see that we covered chapter 10, verse 8 today after the usual recap quiz that covered last week's content. That was chapter 10, verses 6 and 7. Please do look at the description for this video and access this set of slides and the important reference material, recap videos, and other content, all from the free JKYog community portal page, specifically for this Bhagavad Gita study series. So you can get that there, and especially, at least for today, you can also get all the quiz questions because those are not covered at length in the recap video. So again, the recap quiz covered chapter 10, verses 6 and 7. And then we got into chapter 10, verse 8, one important verse with very, very lengthy and detailed commentary. So we saw that today. Chapter 10, verse 8. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam Buddha Bhava Samanvitaha. So chapter 10, verse 8, it has the catchphrase, it all starts here. We'll see why that is the case, but it's a straightforward one. It all starts here. As you might expect or learned, it starts with Sri Krishna. We'll first look at an important Sanskrit word or two. I think we'll take two, let's say. Take pravartate, proceeds. So pravartate here is proceeds because Sri Krishna says that everything proceeds from him. And then this compound word or phrase, bhava samanvitaha, endowed with great faith and devotion. Bhava samanvitaha, endowed with great faith and devotion. How does all this connect? In the translation, we see that Sri Krishna says he is the origin of all creation. Everything proceeds from him. The wise who know this perfectly, they worship him with great faith and devotion. So, as we mentioned in class, there are some important terms and concepts we often see throughout the Bhagavad Gita and throughout spirituality. And in this second sentence that Swamiji has translated, so part of the shloka today, all those are encompassed together. So the wise who know this perfectly, they worship Sri Krishna with great faith and devotion. Well, Sri Krishna then begins this verse, as Swamiji says, by saying, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo. He is the supreme ultimate truth and the cause of all causes. As Swamiji mentions, and as we said in class, chapter 7, at least verses 7 and 12, earlier, just a couple of weeks ago in chapter 10, verses 2 and 3, and then coming up later in chapter 15, verse 15, all this has been repeated multiple times. The Rig Veda states this as well, that it is Sri Krishna who makes people he loves mighty. He makes them men or women. He makes them wise sages. He even empowers certain souls to take on that seat of Brahma. We, of course, figuratively also talked about the seat of Brahma as he is born, which will come up on the next screen as well, from and sitting on that lotus flower, right? That lotus stem and flower emanating from God. We'll see which specific one that is as the video continues. The conclusion, of course, repeatedly is that Sri Krishna is the supreme lord of the material and spiritual creations. Now, we've often heard this, maybe through Swamiji or Maharajji. We often hear this in the context of Leelas. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu here states it as well from his Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Adi Leela, that Sri Krishna himself is not the one directly involving himself in these works or tasks of creation, maintaining and dissolving all these universes. He does that with his energies as well as the help of these own expansions of himself. So that's the big essence that we covered today. We'll see those different expansions one by one. Sri Krishna's role, his primary activity, is to engage in eternal loving pastimes with the liberated souls, the fortunated souls who are liberated and who are in his divine abode. So in this case, Golok. So now we see a sequence of Sri Krishna's expansions. There are three of them. And in terms of the Sanskrit names, we've come across now Karanodakshay Vishnu, and then Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and then Shirodakshay Vishnu. In terms of other labels, we see them as Pratham Purush, Dvitiya Purush, and Tritiya Purush. So that is with enumeration or Sanskrit counting. These are all expansions of Sri Krishna himself. And so the first one is also known as Mahavishnu. So let's look at this. Karanodakshay Vishnu, Mahavishnu, that first Pratham Purush, first expansion of Sri Krishna in the material realm. So that is the Lord, the form of the Lord that presides over the material realm. And that is not just our earth or world, but it is infinite material universes. And so that we want to look at the location as well. He resides in the divine water of the Karan, the causal ocean. So that's why he's known as Karanodakshay Vishnu. Causal, we talked about in class. It is to do with the word cause, the origin, the reason, but also the effecting of something, making something come into being. So that causal ocean is that Karan ocean, and Mahavishnu resides in those divine waters. And then he manifests these universes from the pores of his body. If you all recall, we showed this with the visual of the flyer. And in fact, there was a question as well. Where does all of creation come from? Let's pore over it. So here, use of the word pour in a different sense. Let's, discuss, think about it, ponder at length. Let's pore over it. This is Mahavishnu in that Karan causal ocean. And from him from these pores emanate and get created all these innumerable universes. You can see some of them in these different bubbles, for instance. And so back to Swamiji's commentary, he then expands himself. So Pratham Purush Karanodakshay Vishnu becomes the second one, that is Dvitiya Purush, the second expansion of God in the material realm. And so he then resides at the bottom of each universe, that is as Garbhodakshay Vishnu. What does Garbhodakshay Vishnu do? Well, the first thing is that it is to do with Garb, right? Garb, we talked about last time as well, and through the quiz question in the context of Hiranya Garb. So womb. So that is to do with creation of life forms. Therefore, the firstborn, that is Brahma, Brahma emanates and is born from Garbhodakshay Vishnu. Brahma then guides that process of creation, which is why we often, at least in, you can say, early stages of spirituality or even as growing up, you tend to hear of Brahma as the creator. He is the secondary creator of his universe. So he creates the various gross and subtle elements. Swamiji adds that he creates the laws of nature, the galaxies, etc., and all the forms of life that reside in those universes. So it's a misnomer that he is the creator of the universe. He's actually the secondary creator. But indeed, he is that firstborn of his universe that is responsible for guiding that process of creation. Remember, there are innumerable universes, and there are therefore innumerable Brahmas as well. We've seen that before. We talked about briefly that story of Indra, Lomesh Rishi, the chest of hair, the ants, etc. And we see that today as well. We saw it in one of that shlokas that comes up later. So now we get from the second to the third expansion, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, further expands himself and he becomes from Dvitiya Purush, second Purush, to third Purush, that is Tritiya Purush, the third expansion of God. And he is known as Shiro Dakshay Vishnu. This comes from the word Shir, and in fact, he resides in a place called Shir Sagar, that is at the top of each universe. Shir is often known as that ocean of milk, divine milk. And so he resides at the top of the universe. That's one way you look at it and recognize it. He also, in fact, is and resides as the Supreme Soul, where we've seen this in the hearts of all living beings. We had the quick question in class through the Zoom chat window that we responded to. This is the Paramatma concept. So the Supreme Soul residing in our hearts, noting down all of our karmas, keeping account of all of them over all of our innumerable lifetimes, and then, of course, giving results at appropriate times. That Paramatma, that's why he's also known as the maintainer of the universe. So we get again these three forms: Pratham Purush, Dvitiya Purush, Tritiya Purush. Karanodakshay Vishnu, also known as Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Shirodakshay Vishnu. All these forms, just like all the different avatars of Sri Krishna. We've seen this way back in chapter 4. Now, all these forms of Lord Vishnu are non-different from Sri Krishna. They just have different duties, different energies are manifested or visible to us, but they are all non-different forms of Sri Krishna. And that's why Sri Krishna is often known as the Avatari. You may have heard this from Swamiji, or certainly maybe from Maharajji in his lectures, and the Srimad Bhagavatam verifies this as well. Sri Krishna, he is that primordial form of God. We have seen this word before, revisited it today, or added it to our English dictionaries. The eternal, very, very beginning, original source, the primitive original beginning, that is primordial form of God. And that is why even Brahma prays to Sri Krishna. He recognizes he is the firstborn for his universe, but his origin is Sri Krishna. And so we do see infinite universes emanate from Mahavishnu. In fact, each universe has its own Shankar, Brahma, and Vishnu. We'll see a little bit about Shankar, Shiva, Rudra, etc. in a later verse. It does come up later in chapter 10. And so these are all coming from the pores of Mahavishnu's body. When he breathes in, creation takes place. When he breathes out, that dissolution happens. Again, we see that flyer right here, the imagery to help us. As I mentioned in class, this may not be the deepest or most scientific, but my simple way of trying to remember this may or may not make sense, is if you just think of us as humans, we of course have limitations. God doesn't. But in our limited, finite context and content, as we breathe in, we are taking in oxygen. We need to make space, right, for that oxygen to come in. So perhaps you look at the analogy that something has to emanate. That's why from Mahavishnu's body, from his pores, as he breathes in, that is when creation takes place. And in contrast, when he breathes out, dissolution takes place. Again, as a reminder, don't forget chapter 8, verse 17, that talks about the day and night of Brahma, the kalp, the units of time, and how and when creation and dissolution takes place. We also mentioned chapter 9, verse 23, that earlier we had seen a few weeks ago that those who worship other gods, they also worship Sri Krishna. He states that explicitly. And then he qualified and said that those who worship other gods, they do so by the wrong method. So directly or indirectly, of course, everyone is worshiping Sri Krishna. Here today, chapter 10, verse 8, he states that clearly, that the wise who know this, that Sri Krishna is the source of all origin of creation, then the wise ones, they perfectly worship him. And how do they do that? They do that with great faith and devotion. So that is, of course, the correct way to worship the Lord. And of course, if there's one thing we all wish to do and aspire to do, that is bhajante, worship. We want to, of course, practice unwavering bhakti yog, worshiping Sri Krishna. We've seen also the analogy we saw in class about watering plants. You can water the fruit, flowers, leaves, stems, etc. But if you water the roots, the source, everything will get water. So worship Sri Krishna. Everything else will be taken care of. Everyone else, the devtas, etc., will also be worshipped. We go directly to the source, directly to the origin. So that's the essence for this chapter 10, verse 8. Again, the catchphrase here today was, therefore, it all starts here. It all starts with Sri Krishna. He is that origin. And so, again, do go back, look at this lengthy commentary, look at all the different, paragraphs that Swamiji has, look at the different terms again that we've learned, and keep all that in mind. Keep that for your notes, not just for next week's, recap quiz, but also, of course, as you keep on adding to your spiritual journals and diaries. Final comment I'll make is, of course, in the context of Garbhodakshi here, and as we saw Hiranya Garbha last time, Mummy isn't here today because my sister has had a baby boy. So, in the context of Garb right here, we truly see, the process of creation. So, those are the family commitments she's taking care of. But of course, in spirit with all of us, certainly. And so we look forward to seeing you next time. That will be Saturday, 7th December, 2024. Same time, that's 8 a.m. Central Time in Texas, Dallas, USA. And that is going to be 7:30 p.m. in India. Till then, thank you so much. Radhe Radhe.